and welcome to this technical webinar on the global consultation of the draft disaster-related statistics framework. My name is Ali Nyasulu. I'm a statistician from ESCAP Statistics Division here in Bangkok, and I'll be your moderator this evening, this morning, this afternoon. As a background, this webinar will provide deep insights into the chapters of the draft framework, and we will have a couple of presenters, and will be followed by a set of question and answer sessions. Before I invite Amesh for opening, maybe just a few housekeeping rules, just to make sure everything runs smoothly. So please just mute your microphones, and if you need to speak, you can always raise the hand, or you can put your questions or comments in the chat section. So I would like to now invite Anmesh Kumar, who is the head of the office of the UNDRR office in Bonn. Anmesh is also the co-chair of the Interagency Expert Group on Disaster Related Statistics. So Anmesh, you have the floor to give us an overview of our webinar and the process of this global consultation. Over to you, Anmesh.
Thank you, Alec, and warm greetings to everyone from Bonn. I wanted to just give a brief overview of where we are as of now, and of course, we will be then taken in details by our colleagues on how the disaster-related statistics framework that is currently under development and consultation looks like. 2025 year, as we have as of now, is very exciting time, considering the fact that we have completed 10 years of the Sendai framework, 10 years of the SDGs. Many of us were there a few months back in Geneva for the global platform, the 8th session of the global platform on disaster risk reduction, where there was a very strong call made for strengthening the data ecosystem in which we operate. The big data revolution ushered in through the Sendai framework and SDGs are remarkable. We have 167 countries as of now that are reporting on Sendai framework. 113 countries that are collecting their data on disaster impact, but a lot needs to be done, and the quality and the granularity of data to inform the development and humanitarian decisions is still need to be further improved. I would recall that when the open-ended intergovernmental expert working group, the OIEWG, was concluding its work around 8 years ago in terms of adoption of the indicators of the Sendai framework, that made a very strong recommendation on developing standards for disaster-related data and statistics, and in particular, enhancing the engagement of the National Disaster Risk Reduction Offices and the National Statistical Offices. Since then, UNDRR in particular has been making very steady efforts as the custodian of the Sendai framework, but we are not alone. We have all the regional commissions, in particular ESCAP, that has been doing a tremendous work in terms of ensuring that this work is taken forward. Establishment of the Interagency and Expert Group on Disaster-Related Statistics that I'm pleased to co-chair with my colleague Rike from ESCAP and Kansa from the UK government. Several resolutions of the UN Statistical Commission, 4 annual global expert forums on producers and users of disaster-related statistics, the 5th one being planned this year, are all testimonies to the fact that a lot of efforts and investments have been made to make this process further work, and also work in the better interest of strengthening the data ecosystem. I would want to highlight that the work which is undergoing on the development of the framework is not an indicator development process. It's a framework. It's a framework for statistics. And it focuses on enhancing the statistical robustness of the official disaster risk reduction data. It focuses on improving the interoperability of disaster statistics, and to also enable comparison of disaster impacts across space and time. This year, I would conclude with that. That is also important also moving forward, not only alone in terms of disaster risk reduction, together with other processes that are happening. Many of us are part of the discussions ongoing for the global goal on adaptation under the Paris Agreement, where a total of 100 indicators have been proposed to be adopted by the parties. A lot of these indicators will draw their statistical basis from the framework that we are talking about. And hence, it's very important that we look into this framework from a multiple set of angles so that the resilience building exercises are much more informed, are much more data robust, but at the same time inform where we are in terms of resilience building exercises. So I'll stop with that. Back to you, Anik, and looking forward to a very rich discussion.
Thank you.
Guess you're muted.
All right. Thank you so much for giving us a great insight and walking us through where we've started, why we are here, and all the progress that has made. Thank you so much. So we are now going to proceed into the details of the specific parts, chapters 1 and 3 are, and which will focus on the conceptual frameworks. I'll invite Xuan to actually read us on this section. So you do have 10 minutes for this segment. Thank you. Xuan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Alec, and good evening, dear colleagues. It's very much a pleasure to talk to you for the next 2 hours about the details of the Global Disaster-Related Statistics Framework, or G-DRSF, as we call it, and to give you a little bit of background that has already been done through the IEG on disaster-related statistics, the global consultation process, and some of the key features in some of the chapters of which I think here. Like our colleague had mentioned, we started this process with the goal of meeting the requirement for the SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, the Sendai framework, and other development agenda. Those set of development agenda was established in the landmark year of 2015, and among all those, disaster or the reduction of disaster rate risk plays a very important role in. However, many member states and the United States have recognized that up to the collection is remain inadequate in a lot of the countries, and the global is lacking, so that the previous effort was also on the qualitative rather than quantitative measures of disaster risk reduction. With this consideration, in 2017, the OIEWG started the work to develop a standard to bring together these centralized statistical and disaster data system into a common approach, a common framework, with the eventual aim and the event goal to create a global framework to incorporate all the capacities, development, and the data of disaster-related statistics. So in this effort, in 2018, the Statistical Commission have started to take note on the focus on disaster-related statistics, and with the establishment of IAEG-DRS, or Interagency Expert Group, which is currently steering the statistical framework. It was established in the October 2020 by the Bureau of Statistical Commission, and ever since, each year we had hosted one key event globally, which is the Global Expert Forum of Producers and Users of Disaster-Related Statistics. The first one was hosted by ECE in Geneva, second one by ESCAP in Beirut, third forum in ESCAP in Bangkok, fourth forum by ECA in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And finally, this year, just next month, the ECLAB will host the 5th Global Expert Forum as a full online event in 6 to 8 October online. And we welcome all colleagues to participate in the global forum to share your experiences, key findings, key output, and related to the development of disaster-related statistics. With all this development, we have come to the drafting process since 2024. And now presented in front of you is the first draft of the G-DRSF. And the global consultation has started in last month by the end of August, and with the end date of end of this month, 30th of September. So we are hoping that we can receive all your valuable feedback from national statistical offices, from national disaster management offices, and other key stakeholders, agencies, academia, experts, and all the practitioners for official statistics, as well as for disaster risk reduction. You might have received the link of the global consultation, which include questions from each of the 6 chapters of the framework. For each chapter, there were 2 feedback that we're seeking your input. One is the general comment on whether you believe the structure of the chapter is sound and complete, and if whether there's anything important that you would like to see, but is not featured in the chapter. So that is the first part of the question. And the second part is to seek the input from your respective expertise on the specific topics, definitions, and methodology of the key elements for disaster-related statistics. One is a general specific comment. And welcome you to, if you're the members state NSOs and DMA, we highly recommend that you can submit a coordinated response via the consultation with your counterparts and peers of the NSOs and DMA signatories, so that the response can reflect the total feedback from the country. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, if the moderator would allow me, I will go into the first part of the technical webinar, which is to explain the key component of the first 3 chapters of the global. So at the beginning, chapter 1, why and the need we're setting up this global DRSF. Like we have mentioned before, the need of the disaster-related statistic is overarching and is required by multiple domains and data users. It is relevant to the international through the monitoring and progress evaluation for the Sustainable Development Goals, through the global targets of the Sendai framework and its key priority areas of actions, and through the closer interlinkage and harmonization into the climate change domains and the climate change processes, which are mandated by the Secretariat of the UNFCCC. And finally, we're working to also incorporate the G-DRSF closely with other framework that has already been established and adopted through the Statistical Commission processes. It is also also relevant at the national level by providing a key to compile and disaster-related statistics through the National Strategy of the Development for Statistics, or NSDS, and also by the encouragement and motivation to incorporate it into national DLR strategies and plans to incorporate the data element and a data-driven policy making into national DRR plans. And finally, it's also aimed to help on the sectoral development, on the sectoral strategy, including on the agricultural, health, wash, and other key strategy sectorals that's crucial to the disaster-related statistic domain. So next slide, please. Thank you. And on chapter 2 of the framework, the chapter laid out the foundational conceptual framework of the G-DRSF. There are 5 major parts of the chapter, with the first being the conceptual framework, which I will discuss a little bit in detail very soon. And the chapter also elaborates on the key concept and definitions that pertains to generate any disaster statistics that is consistent and comparable across sectors and across countries. So the recommendation has been given on defining key elements such as hazardous event, hazard, and disasters, on the key elements of disaster risk, including exposure, vulnerability, coping capacity, as well as impact and its components, on the main DR definition and DRM, disaster risk management activities, and also on the related frameworks that pertains to the statistical action as well as to the operation. So in this regard, the chapter 2 also cover the linkage or the complementary name of G-DRSF with regard to systems with SIA sectoral framework, the FES, the global set of climate change statistical indicator, as well as with all the crucial key processes in the geospatial domain, including the integrated geospatial information framework, the ESCAP, the global geospatial framework, and etc. Not only this, we recognize that the framework is not built from the vacuum, rather is developed through a collection of previously published recommendations and guidelines and frameworks. And all of these assessment guidelines and frameworks provide the crucial backstopping and the basic elements and definitions that the G-DRSF is trying to incorporate and improve. So that's why the post-disaster need assessment guideline, the PDNA guideline, the damage and loss assessment guideline, or DALA, the handbook for disaster assessment, and the methodology exercise guide, the ESCAP published DRSF, as well as the UNECE published recommendation on the roles of official statistics in measuring hazard event and disasters, were all incorporated and included. And finally, in this chapter, the key component of hazard classification is discussed. We cannot measure the hazard and its impact if we cannot effectively identify what type of hazard countries are facing. So some of the key hazard classification system, including the HIPS, the World Meteorological Organizations publish cataloging of hazardous event, or WMOCHE, as well as the IRDR published peril classification was discussed as the building block for the G-DRSF. Next slide, please. The third chapter, the chapter 3, the focus was given to the implementation system on how to produce and use disaster-related statistics. In this, the chapter focused on the needed information for both national and international context for creating a DRS data ecosystem. The roles of the NSOs and NDMAs are of particular importance in the national data ecosystem. The institutional collaboration, the challenge, the strengths, and the exercise and the use cases for each of these national data production entities were discussed, and examples were given on how to set up a fully functional incorporating and complete disaster data production systems. Of course, this ecosystem is not the unique setup, and we welcome the comment and the recommendation, especially for member state, on the best practices on setting up a good national data system to produce better statistics and to improve and encourage the better use of disaster-related statistics as a whole. I think so. This is a quick coverage of the chapter 1 through 3, and thank you. Next slide. We have the conceptual framework, which I want to mention a little bit because it's related to the following chapters as well. So in the conceptual framework, we look at the 3 key measurement areas of disaster-related statistics, and that is the risk, the event and impact, and the activities of DRR. As we all know, before the disaster-related statistics should not start only when the disaster hit. Rather, before the onset of the disaster, there's already we can already start to emphasize and collect data on the key element of risk statistics, and that includes the hazard classification, the exposure, vulnerability, and coping capacity. With these 3 elements understood and fully prepared, we can anticipate the occurrence of disaster to minimize, prevent, and reduce its negative impact. So that is the first measurement area on the risk before disaster strike. During and after the disaster strike, the key measurement area focus on the occurrence, on how to measure the count of hazardous event and disasters, and also on the different components of the disaster impact. In the G-DRSF, the impact were categorized within the 3 main categories on the screen. That is the impact on population, impacts on assets, and impact on the flows. Impact on population covers the demographic, including the social loss and the mortality, affected population, the household, and the livelihood that is damaged due to disaster. The impact on assets, focusing on the direct damage, including infrastructure and economic direct damage that's related with statistics. And the third part of it is the impact on flows, which include the losses, direct and indirect, as well as the additional cost. In this framework, the impact of loss is understood as the reduction of the flows of economic activity. So that will be the focus of the discussion in chapter 5. And just a quick note on this topic is that in the current version of the G-DRSF, intangible aspect and non-economic loss are not included as the focus of the G-DRSF. This is due to the difficulty in assessing and estimating the intangible loss and non-economic loss. It doesn't mean that we exclude those losses from the disaster impact, but we rather would put these aspects into the research agenda, to be further developed and elaborated. Next slide, please. And finally, a quick note on the foundation of creating the disaster related statistic is the correct and effective categorization of the hazard and disasters. One of the key effort initiative is the hazard information profile, or the HIPS. It was started in 2021, anchored around the UN General Assembly recommendation to provide hazard classification and disaster classification. So the first HIPS were published in 2021, and after 3 years of using and practicing, in 2024, UNDR and the International Science Council engaged in the first update of the HIPS. As of this year, the new update, or the HIPS 2025 version, is complete with 8 hazard types nested within these 839 clusters and 281 individual hazards. The key focus of this update is to provide the HIPS with a multi-hazard context and to improve its understanding and to enhance its scientific evidence to back the multi-hazard profile. The review was done through 8 dedicated technical teams, 1 for each of these hazard type and 1 steering group, and is widely consulted through intergovernmental bodies, national government, the disaster offices, statistical offices, and academia. So many of you might already be familiar with the process or even contributed. So we thank you for your contribution into the creation of the HIP review. And just to mention also that this will serve as a recommendation for NSOs and the NDMAs and the statistical system to establish effective disaster tracking. Although we do not enforce or recommend like all 281 hazards to be used by every country, because we understand the different nature and scenarios is different country by country. Rather, the HIPS is providing as comprehensive as possible list of all the hazards that's relevant on the global scale, so that we recommend the states and the statistical production agencies to utilize it as you see fit. I'll stop here and pass the floor back to the moderator. Thank you very much, Alec. I'm happy to stay for answers. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Juan, for the presentation on those 3 chapters. Maybe at this point in time, we can take any questions from the floor, if there are any. Just acknowledge some of the colleagues here were asking. I saw that colleague. I think that should be Armenia. We've taken note of your information. Any other comments or questions? Please raise your hand. I'll give it seconds. All right. It seems there are no any other questions, but should you have any questions, always feel free to put them in the chat or comments. That was welcome. So otherwise, we are going to proceed to the next chapter, which is chapter 4 on non-event specific statistics, exposure vulnerability, and the coping capacity. And the presenter is Tirapong. Tirapong is a colleague in the statistics division here at ESCAP in Bangkok. Tirapong, you have the floor, and you are assigned 10 minutes for this chapter presentation. You have the floor, please.
Thanks, Lito. I accept the challenge. I'll try to finish in 10 minutes.
I know this is going to be hard.
Right. I'll turn off my camera because I have some connection issue, but I hope everyone can hear me very clearly. So just a few words before we go into the detail. And as Chuan already mentioned, that we set aside 2 full hours for this webinar, and there's no way that we can cover all aspects of the framework. So we focus on a technical overview of the chapter and highlight key important messages and recommendation measurement issues arises recommended in this chapter, and this is meant to introduce the framework so that you would have a better overview and thinking through to provide your feedback to the online form deadline end of this month. So that's what I will be focusing on the next 9 minutes from now. And chapter 4 focuses on non-event specific statistics. And by its name, these statistics are not linked specifically to any event that occurred. That's why it's non-event specific. These are a set of statistics that are relevant for measuring risks. And for our disaster agency colleagues, you would be familiar with the risk formula that include exposure, vulnerability, and coping capacity. So chapter 4 focuses on these 3 measurement areas. So Sure already mentioned the key use purposes. I will just briefly say for to measure 3 concepts. It should provide key evidence supporting risk assessment, and equally importantly, particularly in post-disaster needs assessment, this information will become critical baseline data that will supplement the PDNA, for example, the exercise. And in the chapter, before we went into specific measurement areas, the chapter discusses 3 key integrating concepts. That's one is the risk assessment, hazard mapping, linking. This chapter is basically spatial, so that mapping is essential for measuring these 3 components of risks, including for physical colleagues. These 3 components combined into a so-called indices called risk index. So that described in the chapter. So let me zoom in into the first one, exposure statistics. So this is the presence of population, assets, and flows within a probabilistically determined hazard area. So in terms of the measurement, is present or absent of these units within a defined hazard area, and populations of people, assets, and this is all encompassing the asset boundary of the SNA. So include fixed assets as building, critical infrastructures, roads, temples, everything that's a fixed asset. It also includes the stock of your produced or semi-produced goods. So that is included in this category are variables. If you have goals, or artwork or anything that of value stored in your properties or households. That's also part of this scope. Also, consumer durables, your cars, your furniture, your appliance is part of this category as well. Also included in here is non-produced assets, the environmental and ecosystem assets within the hazard area. And the four variables include all production, income, employment generated by the presence of economic activities, as well as the ecosystem services. And as Chuan mentioned, the HIPs are recommended as a reference list for hazards and hazard classification. And if you look at the table, recommended template, this might not be readable, so I'm going to zoom in into the first category. On the rows, these are the 8 hazard type by HIPs, and the first one is the hydromet, and is a common practice in disaster community that you can identify exposure in high, medium, and low based on the probability of occurrence or specific hazards. So that reflects real country practices, and it has key policy implication. In the columns that you see, these are exposure elements, the population, assets, and flows, again, present within the hazard area. So we move to vulnerability statistics from the measurement perspective. This is the extension of the exposure statistics by adding data on characteristics of the elements of population, asset, flows that somehow increase their susceptibility to impacts. And these characteristics, for example, population, it can be gender, income, or it can be age, like children and elders might be more likely to be impacted from different hazards type. Asset, this includes build quality. If your house are not built with the stable that make this house very vulnerable, so that can be measured. So one point on characteristics is that it can be individual, it can be combined. So for the easy example would be on population that we can think of urban poor. So we combine two elements, urban or rural plus the income level, or it can be, for instance, indigenous women groups that might be specifically vulnerable to specific hazard. And as we can think in terms of measurement, that the list of characteristics selection has to be based on policy interest and data availability. The vulnerability of flow variables are conceptually included. This is in recognition of how flow, for example, production can be vulnerable to specific hazards. One example provided in the frame in the chapter is that if one service is one shop that buy a particular service in one area, and that is the whole shop in that area. So that poses risks if the disaster happen and that shop somehow impacted. So that particular service may not be able to deliver to all the consumers within the area. But this will be part of the research agenda or the framework so that we can provide more specific measurement guidance. And again, the tables are not readable, so let me zoom in into the first category. The table looks very much like the exposure statistics table by adding the characteristic that will be determined by countries themselves. So the last topic in chapter 4 concerns coping capacity. And coping capacity measure resources and interventions that boost the resilience of units, sector within the economy and the country, the household, businesses, communities, regions, or countries. I think one good measurement explanation in chapter 4 is the clarity between coping capacity and vulnerability. You might have encountered some literatures that these are just opposite side of the same coin, but conceptually and measurement from measurement perspective, they measure different concepts. Vulnerability measures susceptibility to impact, while coping capacity measure their intervention that boosts resilience. So they're not measuring the same concept, and because it focuses on resilience, the variables to be selected will depend quite heavily on country context. But in a broad category, that would include something at the institutional level, preparedness, and household level, or community level, and a series of disaster risk reduction activities. That last one would overlap with chapter 6. So in terms of you might have seen the table in the chapter, but if you look through this, all these variables are basically examples of what can be measured. But the recommendation is to look at it from the institutional perspective, like multi-hazard early warning system, or any monitoring forecasting systems, emergency evacuation facility, as well as to also look at coping capacity at a micro level, at the household level as well. And in terms of the risk reduction activity, this would, if we have the accounting for this as a risk reduction expenditure, there would be the high level indicators or statistics that could be derived from the accounts. And as we know that coping capacity also vary by geographic units within the country. So the recommendation is to break it down by, for example, administrative area within the country. Moderator, so that's my 10 minutes. I hope I didn't spend too much time on it, but happy to answer any question you may have. And I let me emphasize one more time that this is meant to provide technical overview of the chapter. There are a lot of details in the draft itself. But if you have any questions, or if you read the chapter, you have some specific questions, we are happy to answer.
Thank you, Tirapong, for a great dive into chapter 4. And it's my pleasure to invite questions from the audience on this chapter 4. I open the floor now.
Yeah, and feel free to raise your hand and open microphone, or you can also type your question if you prefer in the chat box.
Tirapong, I'm not getting any questions. I suspect it was very clear. If not, I'll still invite people to take time and dig into chapter 4. And for chapters 1 and 3, you know, if there are still other questions on these 4 chapters, please feel free to give us some questions. Remember, we're really trying to consult and get as much input from different practitioners that are present in here today. I'm not getting any not, then I'll have the pleasure to ask Tirapong to proceed to chapter 5, which is on event specific statistics, occurrences, and impacts. So I propose you proceed.
Thanks, Alec. I'm happy to do so. So now we come to chapter 5, which focuses on event-specific statistics. Now, unlike and we want to measure how many events has occurred in your district and what kind of we measure them consistently. So he used purpose for event statistics really to understand historical trends that would actually fit into your hazard mapping in chapter 4. As we mentioned in chapter 4, this is really based on probability of occurrence when we define high level and low exposure and forecasting of what might happen in the future. But the backbone data are the historical trends of what has occurred in different areas of the country. And that also help define areas of risk that you can also provide targeted DR strategy and very focused early warning and financing support. In terms of the occurrence statistics, the measurement focuses on frequency, geographic location, and trends of hazardous events and disasters. For the impact statistics, these are the extent and nature of the impact caused by those events that occurred. And as in chapter 4, the HIPs are recommended as a reference list for hazard classification. So let me start with occurrence statistics. So this is basically basic counts of events that have occurred within your national boundary during a reporting period. And you now started to be introduced into different terms, right? So one is hazards, the second one is hazardous events, and the third one is disasters. And for disaster community colleagues, these terms are very clearly defined. So if we let me take a quick overview of that. Hazards are a phenomenon. So when we refer to my country has a lot of floods, so those are hazards. But when hazards is realized, it becomes a disaster. When the hazard happen, it become hazardous events. So hazardous event is the manifestation of hazards. The event causes an impact that somehow considered very serious and country consider is as an emergency, then that somehow would be categorized as disaster. So when we look at events in occurrence statistics, so we don't talk about hazards because those are concepts, but we talk about hazardous events and disaster. And there are three subcategories in there. The first one is hazardous events without impacts. Second one is hazardous events with impacts. And the last one is the disaster. And these three subcategories are mutually exclusive. You can imagine an event like a massive flood in one country that usually fall under disaster. There are also other hazardous events that cause some impact, but not to the level country would consider disaster. So that would be recorded under the second category. And there are also events that happen without impact. You would know in Americas, you would have land sprout that just happen and go, or you can actually have tsunami without observable consequences. You can also have very low magnitude earthquake that doesn't cause any impact. So those will be recorded as a hazardous event without impact. We understand that it's very important to be consistent, at least for measurement purposes, for country to have a clear statistical definition, not the technical definition that we already have from the UN General Assembly, but to have a statistical measurement guidelines on how to define disaster. So that will be part of the framework's research agenda. So we look at the table itself. The roles are the 8 heap types. And the usual practice in polling occurrence statistics are bottom up. So events happen at the local level. So maybe it might happen in different provinces or districts. So data are usually gathered from the local level. It could also happen that one event expand more than one geographic unit. If you think of one big flood, for example, it can cover 5 provinces. And if you look at the first 3 main columns, you would include them in each of the geographic unit. That means that a simple row sum would cause double counting of the events. That's why we have the second to last column on adjustment for multiple counting of the events. So if I use the for example that impacted 5 provinces at once or 5 states at once, at the national level there are still only 1 event. So the adjustment should be recorded as -4. So that would make the national total in the total row sum as 1, right? So some of the recording principle. So we want in terms of recording of the events, we should look at the recording in terms of the reporting period. Events are recorded in the year they occur. It sounds very simple. There's some certain difficulties in statistical recording. For sudden onset events, these are events that happen very fast and finish very fast. It's generally very straightforward because they're short duration. That it could also happen that events spanning 2 periods. For example, you can have a hurricane at the end of December 2023, but continue until first or second week of January 2024. If that's the case, the event should be recorded using that start date as a reference point. So they should be recorded in 2023 occurrence statistics table if your reporting period is annual. For slow onset events, these are events that are usually spanning multiple periods and by consensus, and I think this is a strong recommendation from disaster community as well. So the event will be recorded on an annual basis. So there's another type called cascading events. These are 2 or more than 2 events connected to each other or trigger the other. There are clear examples of tsunami that triggered by an earthquake. It can also be disease outbreak after a hurricane, or it can be landslide after big earthquake. So as far as the occurrence statistics is concerned, the event itself should be recorded separately because the classification and the hazard types are distinct, so they can be recorded as a distinct event. The complication and challenges would be how to record the impacts that we will discuss in a few more slides. In terms of the impact statistics, we define it as observable consequences caused by hazardous event with impact, the category B in the previous table, and disaster, category C in the previous table, during a reporting period and for defined spatial area and durations. And in terms of the impact components, we again align with exposure limit in chapter 4. So population. One note here is that long-term human consequences are excluded. For instance, they're reported that of the cases where one disaster event may result in psychological disorders of one population group, or one big event may move one group of industry down to their smaller scale. So those or the people that have to be left in poverty because of event in the past 10 years. So those are excluded from the scope. For impact on assets, these are basically the damage by the PDNA definitions. It can be partial or full destruction of all the asset categories that we discussed in chapter 4. And in terms of the measuring impact to flows, this includes losses, as Chuan mentioned, and also the additional costs. These are outlay required for economic units to resume their operation, or for households to resume their livelihood. If you look at this is the population impact tables. Again, if you look at the columns, there are eight HIP types, and on the rows that there are different impacts, like causality, so death, missing, injured. Also included in the population impacts are different kinds of movements, both forced and voluntary, like evacuation, displacement, relocation, and is also counting numbers of people that have their employment, education, or livelihood disrupted. And you will see that we have adjustments both rows and columns here, because it could happen that the same person is impacted multiple times by multiple events during the reporting period. So we can, if we have additional information of the person, we can adjust for the multiple counting. On the other hand, so the same events can also cause many kind of human impacts, and that can be adjusted as well. So that adjusted two ways, both row and column. And again, the details are described in the chapter itself. I think this is the last table for chapter 5. This is the damage, loss, and additional costs. And columns are, again, the 8 HIP types. And now you see that they recommended segregation by industries following ISIC and households. And on the rows, you will see damage, loss, and additional costs. The gray cells are new by definition, because households in SNA and SIA, they are final consumers, so they are not engaged in production. That's why they're not part of the loss. But if household is engaged as a producer, then any loss or additional cost occur to them should be recorded in their respective economic activity. So some of the recommendations. The first one is on the recording. The impact should be attributable to the events that caused them. So that's a linkage between occurrence statistics and impact statistics on there. And in terms of the sudden and slow onset, this basically same as the occurrence statistics. You should follow the starting date if the event span 2 periods for the sudden onset, and do it annually if it's a slow onset events. For cascading events, these are slightly more difficult. So there are 2 scenarios here. So if the impacts can be attributed to the events in the cascading sequence, for instance, if we have, I think, but example that I discussed earlier was disease outbreak following a hurricane. And if you look at the nature of impacts of disease outbreak with hurricane, it's very distinct. They're not the same kind of impact. So in that case, we should record the impact separately according to the hazard type and their respective impact categories. But if the impact just cannot be attributed to the event, to separate events, one example could be that we have building collapse because of earthquake, and it's difficult to assign mortality, whether it's because of the earthquake or because of building collapse. Then you should it's a pragmatic decision that you record to the most relevant event. So in that case, it may be building collapse. I think I discussed the treatment of household already. If they are final consumer, everything is recorded under household. But if they are producers for damage, they should be still recorded as households. And this again is the pragmatic choice because for many households or businesses, they share their assets within their own with their own unit, either for final consumption or for the production, and that is difficult to measure separately. So that should be part of the damage for the household. But for loss and additional cost, they should be recorded in their relevant economic activity. For the valuation, which is perhaps the most relevant and key documentation from the chapter, is that for damage, which are all the assets, right? We should use as-built replacement cost valued at purchaser's prices prevailing prior to the event, and this should exclude building back better cost. So that in a nutshell, the recommendation is try to measure the damage that was occurred. So that's why we should use the as-built replacement cost, and without looking at how to build them better next time. For loss, so these are the production side of the measurement. So we should use producer's price again before the event occur. And if just in case that producer's price are not available, then purchaser's price might be used as the second alternative. For any damage to asset, the ecosystem asset, or loss of environmental services, the valuation should follow recommendation in the SEA Settle Framework and SEA Ecosystem Accounting. Thank you, moderator, and sorry that I take more time on chapter 5, but hope we are doing well on time.
Thank you, Tirapong, for taking us through on chapter 6. I think there's some issues coming up, but I know Xuan has raised, but it appears some of our colleagues would rather have the whole framework in a single document, maybe just for ease of reference as they give feedback. So maybe food for thought. Can I invite any other questions from the audience? Yes, I see a hand from Sophia, and Sophia will go first, and then Naira will go second.
Okay, good afternoon, good morning for all, and thanks for giving us this chance to provide you with the comments on the global consultation for this great framework. But just here, I hope that my voice is clear.
Yeah, at least I can hear you.
Yeah, all of us know that we have the metadata about the SDG indicators, and they are produced and prepared by the interagency expert group. Here we have the framework, and we have a definition and concepts for the same about the disaster issues, and we have and the work and the aim of these frameworks to make the work is easier, not as complicated. And we have FDIS for the environment statistic, and also we have the set of indicator for climate change, and we have Tendai framework. So we know that we have a lot of frameworks related to environment and disaster and environmental issues, but the aim of the work is to make the work easier and not complicated. So I'm sure they are linked in and cross-cutting issue, but we have to know more about these all from how they are integrated, and as a statistician and NSOs, which is the best one to rely on while we are working on the disaster and the climate change indicators. Thanks.
Um, thank you, Sophia. And I take that as more of a comment, and I think maybe seeking to know more how this could be practically integrated. Chirapong, maybe did you want to give any insights, reactions from Sophia before we go to Naira?
Yeah, thanks, Alec. And well, at least on the globally available disaster-related indicators, and let me emphasize indicators. For example, Sendai indicators or this disaster-related indicator within SDGs. The definitions and concepts are quite aligned. It's actually is very aligned with the G-DRSF. When you go through the chapters themselves, the G-DRSF provide measurement framework, not an indicator framework. So it doesn't propose any kind of indicators in addition to what already available nationally and globally. It aims to provide measurement recommendations for statistics that relate to disaster, and the tables that we have gone through for chapter 4 and 5 would assist if they are compiled in producing many disaster indicators that is relevant within the conceptual framework of G-DRSF. So is exactly what Sophia said. This is cost cutting, and the idea of the GIS is to provide statistical foundation, classification, concept definition, and key statistical recording or valuation that would help in terms of getting consistency and current statistics across time and countries. So that my comment back to Sophia. I think Chuan might also want to come in a bit on this.
Xuan, was this on the same, or I give Naira the floor first?
Thank you. My question is very short. Thank you, Tirapong. Very interesting, and tables were very detailed. But maybe I missed something. But when you speak about the damages for households, the assessment of damages for households and for business, was there anything about the economic losses? I didn't see it. It was just damage directly to the business, but not to the economic evaluation. Or maybe I missed something.
Chirapong, maybe you might wish to respond to that, and then we'll go to Xuan.
Yep, I can quickly respond to that. Thanks, Naira. And this is really taking the alignment with other statistical framework that households are final consumers. So what kind of impact they can get from hazardous disaster? So they can have a lot of damage, right? But when it comes to loss and additional costs, by definitions, this follow the practices in the post-disaster needs assessment guidelines that these are related to production. So if we think of household as final consumers, they wouldn't have lost an additional cost for production. But if households perform economic activity, if I have my own farm for feeding my family and maybe part of them gets sold, then if my farm is impacted because of one event, then my agricultural production loss will be recorded as agriculture according to ISIC, although it's household own farm. own farming. And this is, we have Alec here as well. He is a SA guru, so so if he can also provide additional insights. But basically, treatment of households are aligned with recommendation in the SAA this year.
Yeah, thanks, Tirapong, for putting the moderator on spot. And I think this is the conversation that you could always have with your national accountants, particularly if you read through the SNA, the capital account, there is an item there which would be the best approximation of economic losses, which in typical SNA language sometimes referred to as other changes in volumes of natural assets, which could actually often occur as a result of a catastrophic event of some kind. So some countries do have those sort of estimates, and others that don't maybe try to do, they'll possibly go through maybe insurance companies just to make those a certain case. But that is also, of course, very restrictive because certain losses do occur even when they do not have a title or are not under any specific ownership. So, Shuan, I give you the floor, please.
Thank you, Alec. And I just want to quickly add on to the answer that Tirapong has just mentioned with regard to Sophia's question about not to complicate the statistical production even further. So I think this is very important, and we always keep that in mind. The objective of the G-DRSF is to help statistical offices and disaster management office to better and faster producing disaster-related statistic for the absorption of the collection of the framework and the indicator set that Sophia you have just mentioned. The metadata of the methodology should be the same. We have worked very closely with the IAEG for SDGs, with the Sendai framework, the technical team, which is based in UNDR, and with the global set team, which is based in DESA in UNSD, as well as the new targets of the global goal adaptation. So all of these indicators and the statistic production should align. So the hope is that the one indicator, for instance, disaster mortality, can be used to do national monitoring, national evaluation for SDG reporting, for global set reporting, for Sendai framework, and for GGA as well. In this sense, I would like to mention that out of the 38 Sendai framework indicators, 12 of them are shared with SDG, so they have the same methodology and metadata. 16 of them are shared with the global set of climate change statistics and indicators, and more than 20 or so are proposed to serve as a basis for the global goal on adaptation, the GGA proposed indicator set. So that's why the hope is the G-DRSF will help to enhance the production of these indicators and statistics so that we will have a one stone, four birds kind of, so to speak, effect that one production can benefit multiple indicator set and frameworks, and not to complicate things matters further. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think we also have another hand where I wish I would read Arabic. Yes, there is a hand from RC there. Please go ahead. There is a hand up from. I can't. The participant who put up a hand there, I think the name is in Arabic, so I really can't tell. But please go ahead and ask your question.
It's Ali Farhan Ahmed.
Thank you. Go ahead. Thank you so much. Sorry, I can't read my Arabic is bad. Go ahead, please. You have the floor. You are muted. Still have the hand up, but oh, Arfan Ahmed, please go ahead.
شوف هنا الفصل السادس محاسبة هنا يا حبيبي محاسبة نفقات الحد من مخاطر الكوارث. محاسبة ايوه هذه انا محاسبة.
I think, yeah, I don't know if anybody can translate. Like,
I do not. Maybe if it was maybe written in the chat, we could easily translate it. Yeah, maybe while we wait for that solution, I think there is another question from Cecile. Shuan maybe might wish to respond to that.
yes, happy to. So Cecile, thank you for the question about, is there a matrix that shows the information that I just mentioned? I think in regards to the same indicator across framework. We have some matrix and demonstration that shows the interlinkage between some of the frameworks, but in my knowledge, I don't believe there is a overall matrix that show all the frameworks linkage. I can share with you, for instance, the linkage between the Sendai framework monitor indicators and the SDGs. And there's also a closely work. We also closely work with the UNSD, for instance, to have the global set incorporated with the Sendai framework and also the drafted GGA indicators as well. And in that, I can look at I don't have the matrix with me, but I'll look into providing you with all the details on these interlinkage. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Maybe Alec, I can also add something on reducing burdens from countries. And I think the best way is to make comparison. And for NSO colleagues, you might know the SEAT already, the System of Environmental Economic Accounting, that has a lot of accounts in the manual. And if you are able to compile, for example, one account within the SEAT, for example, land account or water account, you can use a lot of statistics within the account to generate many indicators within that thematic area. And that's very same account can also be used multiple times for multiple national or international reporting. And this is the same for the G-DRSF, that the table template presented to you, if they are compiled, for example, the population impact statistics or damage, loss, and additional cost table, once they're compiled, you can use them to produce many standard indicators, many SDG indicators, and many FDS indicators, and many more that relates to the concept and scope of those tables. I think that's where you invest one time, but you can utilize them multiple purposes.
Thank you, Chirapong, for those further reactions. Any other reactions or comments from the audience before we proceed to the last but not the least chapter? I do not see any hand. I'll therefore propose that Chirapong, we proceed to chapter 6 on expenditure accounting for DRR.
Yeah, thanks, Alec. So happy to do so. So the last chapter of the framework focuses on disaster risk reduction expenditure accounting, and so this basically track all expenditures for disaster within the country. So once if we are able to produce this account, it should facilitate analysis of the cost benefits of DRR intervention over time. And if we start putting the pieces together, chapter 4, we know the risk statistics related to risk, right? Chapter 5, we know the actual impact and how frequent these events occurred. When you combine those information, as well as the amount of money spent to reducing risk and mitigate impact, we would be able to assess the effectiveness of the previous DR intervention. So you would expect that if you have a lot of DR expenditure, either for prevention or mitigation or preparedness, then the next reporting period you should have better coping capacity. You should have better vulnerability and exposure stats as we discussed in chapter 4. And once the event occur, that's something we cannot prevent, but the impacts should be reduced. So that would be the way to evaluate effectiveness of DR intervention, and that would also inform the future design of the new DR strategy. And in concept, DR expenditure accounts encompasses 2 main accounts, and for national accountants in this call, so we follow the thematic accounting approach, formerly known as satellite accounting of the approach of the SNA. So if you have done any satellite accounts before, the approach is identical to the DR expenditure accounting. And it includes 2 main accounts in here. One is the expenditure account. The second one is the transfer account. And we will go into a bit more details a bit later. But in terms of the coverage, so the scope include all the records of all types of expenditures and transfer in the economy, undertaken with DRR as their primary purpose within a reporting period. That means that if there's one spending on one activity, and that activity has the main purpose to reducing risk, then that will be recorded in the account. It's also possible that one activity may have multiple purposes. But if the main one is still DRR, then it should be included. But if the main one is not DRR, then they are out of the scope. And the accounts are compiled based on the classification of DR activity that we will see later and also in the chapter. It's important to understand economic units involved in DR activities so that we know who we are actually focusing on. So the first unit is a producing unit. So this unit supplies the DRR goods and services, right? And that there's a producing unit, then there's purchasing unit. So these are the unit that buy or procures those goods and services, and engage directly with the producer in the producing unit. Now the third unit would be the funding unit. So this is the unit that finances the expenditure, and this they can be purchasing unit if they use their own budget, or they make loans or other debt instrument. The funding unit can be in terms of transfers, such as grants or either in cash or in kind or any kind of subsidies. And the last unit is the beneficiary unit, as this is the end user of the DR intervention. If we take example of investing in early warning system, people who produce the system are producing unit. And perhaps the government would be the purchasing unit that buy the early warning system. For the funding may come from central government budget or transfer from ODA. And the beneficiary unit are people that are covered within the early warning system coverage. So as far as chapter 6 is concerned, the scope focuses on the purchasing unit and the funding unit on the transfer itself, which is one of the important DR financing sources. And as we discussed, additional accounts can be developed, and they are in the research agenda of the framework. And on the slide is the classification of the activities. You would find definitions of each of this category in chapter 6, but this is all encompassing and quite comprehensive and cover quite exclusively the DR activities that could be undertaken. Now let's zoom into the first account of the chapter, which is the expenditure account. On the columns that are typical institutional sectors as described in the system of national accounts plus rest of the world. And on the rows, there are 3 blocks here. The first block is a recurrent expenditure. It's basically intermediate plus final consumption. So it's a consumption expenditure. And number 1 to 5 are the classification of their activity. The block B is the investment expenditure. So in terms of the cost fixed capital formation, and that we can also spend on investing a few things, right? So that also follow the classification of their activities. And the last one is the supplementary information. For example, if a government reclaim certain land area or buy certain area for disaster shelters, for example. So that the land is non-produced asset. So it doesn't follow in block A or B. So it can be added in the supplementary information. So this table records expenditures as they occur, and they follow neatly the thematic accounting of the SNA. So any concept of thematic accounting should be applied in this table. The second and last table in chapter 6 is the transfer table, and this is basically symmetric or very similar to input-output, but at the institutional sector levels, you will see sectors that make the transfer and sector that receive the transfer, and it can be many combinations. It can be that if a typical one would be that is of interest would be the ODA. So that would be the transfer made by the rest of the world as the last column. Last row, and received, for example, by central government in the general government column, and so that would facilitate the recording of transfers, both within domestic transfers and transfer from the rest of the world. So the overall scope of chapter 6, I just want to leave this page on to remind everyone that the global consultation will end at the end of this month. So really look forward to your feedback. As a matter of principle, the G-DRSF will consider feedback that received through the global consultation. So if you have any comments, please do use the online form. I believe you have received the email already. If not, the website of this technical webinar would provide the link to the online form as well as the links to all chapters. I think this is very important that you provide your feedback, because they will shape the framework before submission to the United Nations Statistical Commission next year. So they, as we mentioned, that the technical webinar just serves as the technical overview, and we really much look forward to feedback. But if you have any questions on chapter 6, again, happy to clarify.
Chirapong, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I think you were breaking.
Oh, sorry. So where did I break? Oh, I finished chapter 6.
Yep.
Okay, sorry. There's a connection issue here. But I think what I wanted to emphasize was that I would like to encourage everyone to submit their feedback through the online form. And if you don't have access to the online form, they are on the website that Khun Piyapat just shared in the chat.
Thank you. I see a hand from Lalian. Vivian, you have a hand up.
Hi. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, this is on a comment on the matrix that mentions about expenditures that will cover intermediate expenditures, final expenditures, and the gross capital formation, particularly on the fixed capital formation. I'm just wondering whether it will help if we can include also expenditures in terms of the inventories. This is part of the investments, but this is not under fixed capital formation, because there are expenditures, like for example, mostly by the households that are already purchasing some of the, like for disaster, they repair their houses, they put up their kit, and so on. So these are some of the expenditures that we might be able to quantify under the inventories. Or thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for that question. I think maybe I can quickly respond to that, but Tirapong, you can actually maybe add more spine to it. But I think technically, I think the whole idea of the framework is that it is very consistent with the SNA, and I think when we classify gross capital formation from SNA side, the change in inventories becomes an integral part of gross capital formation. But maybe to simplify things, I think one of the approaches is like maybe to present gross capital formation in terms of its different components. I think that would be maybe one of the ways we can actually consider. So I take that as very good feedback in terms of simplifying the way gross capital formation is actually presented. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, and Alec, yeah, I don't have any further response to Vivian, but just want to encourage Vivian, if you could, if you haven't done so, that is exactly feedback that we would like to see. And if you can submit the online form to chapter 6, that would be excellent. And for other participants, Vivian is from the Philippines, and Philippines has done excellent work on DRR estimated accounting. So they have a series of publication on that already. So Vivian speaks really from the experience.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Vivian, for giving us some of the practical perspectives. Any other comments or questions? I do not see any hand. Maybe Tirapong, you were quite clear, but I think this is not the end of everything. Before we proceed to the next bit of our webinar today, I think let me just state that this session is being recorded, and the materials are available. There is a link that has been posted in the chat, and would encourage each and everyone to give their feedback on all the chapters through the links that we provided, particularly the forms, so that we can get as much as possible. And I believe this webinar was really an eye-opener, just to know what is actually in those specific chapters, but maybe at a more detailed level, you can take your time and respond. At this point in time, I think we'll just go to the last bit of our webinar, next steps and closing. And at this juncture, I would like to invite Kanza Ahmed, Global Public Health Advisor and Epidemiologist at the Global Disaster Climate and Health Team, the UK Health Security Agency, and also a co-chair of the Interagency Expert Group on Disaster-Related Statistics. Kanza, you have the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alec, and to everybody who's on this call. I know everybody's really busy, so we really appreciate you taking the time to dial in today to engage with this session and to ask your questions as well. Really hoping from the IAEG side that actually this has been informative and your feedback would be welcome. Is there any kind of further information you need from us to go forward? We are really keen that actually we get as many people as engaged as possible. And this is a really important framework. The Global Disaster-Related Statistics Framework is a culmination of a very lengthy process, as was shown earlier in the slides. And it's been the work of multiple partners. And those of you who are contributing to the consultation are our partners too. So you are key to this process. And we really do want to hear from you. But I also want to take this opportunity to thank the people who've got us to this stage as well, because I don't think we've had the opportunity to publicly thank them. So thanks to my co-chairs for sort of guiding and supporting and co-leading alongside myself. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Swanche, Tirapong and Hakan, who have been basically coordinating, putting this document together between them, without which we wouldn't have sort of the chapters available, but also actually to every single person that has contributed to writing those chapters and advising and editing. Your contributions have been really valuable, and there's too many to mention right now, but you are all valuable, and really want to thank everybody who's been involved. Thank you to those who have already responded. We are already getting responses through the consultation process, and we really are kind of on a weekly basis looking at your feedback and looking at how we can respond, because we are taking this very seriously. And thanks in advance to those who are going to respond. We are really looking forward to hearing from you and reading what you have to say. So in terms of next steps, the consultation is open until 30th of September. Coordinated responses are very welcome, although individual responses are also welcome if you have particular feedback for us. We also do want to hear from you about the strengths of the Global Disaster Rating Statistics Framework, not just the kind of improvements, but also what do you think works really well and will actually help you in your day job as well. Because I think that's also important feedback, that we can ensure that we protect those areas that you feel strongly about. And so any improvements that you recommend are sort of greatly appreciated. I just want to remind everybody that this framework is for all of us. And so it's important that we are jointly working together to create this framework. Ultimately, it's only as good as the feedback that we give, and it's really important that we produce something that's useful, usable, and eventually going to be used by all of us. And so I really want to ensure that we all own this and feel comfortable enough to be able to contribute. So thanks once again. Really appreciate the work that everybody's putting into this. Look forward to reading your responses and hopefully getting this over the line in March next year. Thanks in advance.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for turning up. So this marks the end. Goodbye.